Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. We've got some explosive developments coming out of Europe that you absolutely need to hear about. The political establishment is cracking, and the cracks are showing in ways they never expected. If you're new here, I'm Andrew Meatrich. I used to work inside a state-run media outlet, saw how stories were twisted to fit the narrative, and I walked away. Now I'm independent, I speak freely, and I tell you what really matters. So here's what's happening. Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission, just got absolutely demolished by Germany's own defense minister, Boris Pistorius. And I mean demolished. This wasn't some polite diplomatic disagreement. This was a public takedown that nobody saw coming. Von der Leyen has been making these grand speeches about deploying multinational military forces in Ukraine as part of some long-term security guarantees after the war ends. Sounds reasonable on the surface, right? Wrong. Pistorius came out swinging, saying it's fundamentally wrong to discuss these scenarios before peace talks even begin. But here's the real kicker. He said the European Union doesn't have the authority and doesn't have the jurisdiction to deploy troops anywhere, for anyone, for anything. Those were his exact words. No jurisdiction. Now think about what just happened here. The German defense minister just told the head of the European Commission that she doesn't know what she's talking about when it comes to military deployment. That's not just embarrassing, that's a complete undermining of EU authority at the highest levels. Von der Leyen thought she had the power to make these declarations, and Germany just said, "Nope, you don't." But wait, it gets even more ridiculous. European media outlets have been spinning this story about GPS jamming on von der Leyen's aircraft. Manfred Weber, chairman of the European People's Party, claimed that the GPS interference on Ursula's plane proves the European Commission is now a target for attacks. Dramatic stuff, right? Here's where it gets interesting. Flight Radar, the global flight tracking service that millions of people use every day, came out as an expert witness and said von der Leyen's plane had a perfectly good GPS signal the entire time. No interference, no jamming, nothing. And you know what? People trust Flight Radar more than they trust politicians. That's just common sense at this point. Hit that like button if you appreciate getting the real story behind the headlines. And don't forget to subscribe because we're just getting started with today's revelations. But NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is taking this GPS story very seriously. He's declared that he and the entire alliance are deeply concerned about interference after this navigation incident with von der Leyen's aircraft. Rutte says NATO is working day and night, to make sure bad actors don't do this again. So we have Flight Radar saying there was no GPS interference, but NATO's top official is treating it like a major security threat. Either Flight Radar is wrong, which would be unprecedented, or NATO is reacting to something that didn't actually happen. Neither scenario looks good for the credibility of our institutions. Meanwhile, over in Spain, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez is preparing his country for what he calls future climate crises caused by increasingly severe heat and devastating wildfires this summer. Sánchez is pushing hard on the climate change narrative and has now prepared Spanish citizens for crises and disasters that will only get worse and worse again in the future. His solution? Create a state civil defense service to coordinate crisis response, establish a network of climate shelters across the country, and completely rethink forest management and land use. Translation: we're probably looking at new restrictions and regulations coming down the pipeline. The creation of climate shelters is particularly concerning because it suggests they're expecting conditions that require people to seek refuge. Now here's something that should outrage anyone who believes in democratic discourse. In the Czech Republic, former Prime Minister Andrej Babiš was physically attacked at a campaign rally in eastern Czech Republic. Someone hit him in the head with a metal object. Let that sink in for a moment. We're talking about violent assault on a political leader at a democratic political event. Babiš was taken to the hospital for examination, and the attacker was arrested that same evening. The Patriots for Europe political group, which includes most of the right-wing parties represented in the European Parliament, is absolutely furious about this development. And they should be. This kind of lawless behavior against politicians is completely unacceptable. European deputies are no longer talking about Czech politics being civilized. That conversation is over. The Patriots for Europe expressed their support for Babiš and wished him a speedy recovery, but they're also pointing out that this kind of chaos will only strengthen right-wing forces across Europe. And honestly, can you blame voters for moving toward parties that promise law and order when political violence is becoming normalized? Speaking of political shifts, in France, the leadership of the National Rally, Marine Le Pen's party, is openly discussing the possibility of winning an absolute majority in the new parliament if early elections are triggered. This could happen as early as next week if the vote of confidence in the government fails. Everything points to that vote of confidence failing. The French people want stability, and the National Rally is positioning itself as the guarantor of that stability. Nobody's challenging those words right now, which tells you everything about the current state of French politics. But here's what should really concern everyone. France's Ministry of Health is already considering scenarios where the country becomes a rear base capable of receiving massive flows of wounded soldiers, both French and foreign. They've announced that by early 2026, everything must be ready to receive the wounded. Full-scale preparation has already begun. Think about what this means. French authorities are preparing for mass military casualties by 2026. They're not talking about the 2027 elections anymore because most people don't know what's going to happen in 2026. That's the level of uncertainty we're dealing with. Meanwhile, in Britain, they continue persecuting people for posts they don't like on social media. Graham Linehan, one of the creators of the famous sitcom Father Ted, revealed that he was arrested at Heathrow Airport for 3 posts on X, where he simply expressed his point of view. Linehan thought he had the right to express his personal opinion on social media because every human being is born free. Turns out he doesn't have that right. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think about the state of free speech in supposedly democratic countries. This is getting out of hand. After police interrogation, Linehan's blood pressure reached stroke levels. He was rushed to the hospital, placed under observation, then released on bail pending the completion of the investigation. They're still investigating his social media posts. This is the reality of Orwellian Britain today. There's no other way to put it, and yet they loudly proclaim they're defending democracy. In Poland, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs wasn't invited to join President Andrzej Duda's delegation when he visits Washington on September 3rd to meet with Donald Trump. They didn't think it was necessary for Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski to accompany the Polish president to this meeting. The president's administration explained that the presence of foreign ministry representatives wasn't planned and isn't necessary. Their priority is restoring good relations with the United States. That's a pretty clear dig at the current foreign minister. But here's the interesting part. Sikorski is traveling to the US at the same time as the president, just separately. He'll be conducting his own meetings, most likely with Democrats, since he's essentially their representative in the Polish government. Poland also showcased an unusual development at this year's arms exhibition. They presented a drone disguised as a swan, created by the Military Institute of Land Forces for covert reconnaissance and surprise attacks. The device is essentially a bird decoy with a camera in its head. It's basically a large box with equipment capable of carrying up to 10 kilograms of payload. The drone can move on water, mimicking the movement of a real bird, and it's also equipped with small wheels for traveling on land. However, experts are skeptical about its effectiveness. Poland wanted to surprise or maybe even frighten people with their development, but it didn't quite work out. That happens sometimes. Here's something fascinating about generational change. According to recent research, the younger generation, those born after 1997, has developed a completely new approach to work. They no longer strive for career advancement and don't dream of becoming managers. 68% of young employees don't want leadership positions under any circumstances. They simply don't need it. Flexible schedules are now the main demand of the younger generation. They want more freedom, fewer working hours, and more time for themselves. Experts conclude this isn't laziness, but a new modern lifestyle. People no longer strive for career peaks, but for self-realization, financial independence, and freedom. Basically, they want every day of the week to feel like a weekend. If you're finding this analysis valuable, smash that subscribe button and consider becoming a channel sponsor. Your support helps me stay independent and keep bringing you the stories mainstream media won't touch. Italy has some interesting developments in the tourism sector. Authorities in popular tourist regions have introduced strict rules for vacationers. Violators face fines up to €7,000 or even up to 6 months in prison. Tourism Minister Daniela Santanchi explained that Italy loves tourists but expects respect. In Sardinia, you can no longer build sandcastles, dig holes on the beach, or take sand and shells home. The fine for this reaches €3,000, and people have already been fined. In Liguria, flip-flops are banned on mountain trails. On the island of Capri, shoes that make too much noise on the cobblestones are prohibited. In Rome, tourists are forbidden from sitting on the Spanish steps or dragging suitcases up them, which can result in a €400 fine. But here's the most interesting part. Italian authorities have also tightened penalties for buying counterfeit designer items. Tourists who buy fake bags, watches, or anything else risk getting up to €7,000 in fines or up to 6 months in prison. So people are counterfeiting various brands, but the tourist who buys the knockoff is the one who gets punished. Try saying after this that they don't think about people in our time. They think about people plenty, just not in the way you might expect. These are the information highlights for today that tell us a lot about where we're heading. Write your opinions about everything that's happening in the comments below. The establishment is cracking, the old rules are breaking down, and new realities are emerging whether we like it or not.